Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Can I call you to order? As you will be aware, the current independent chair has resigned and we're out for recruitment. Unfortunately, the deputy chair has been called to jury service, so we don't have a nominated chair for this meeting. I wonder if we could elect one for this meeting, and in those circumstances, could I ask for nominations from the floor, please? Councillor Dale.
I have pleasure nominating Councillor Jeff Reid.
And I'm happy to second that.
Thank you, Councillor Wood.
Thank you. You've showed in me. I hope we can expedite the proceedings and move on to our next meeting. So, the first item on the agenda is apologies for absence.
Chair, we just have apologies from the Vice Chair.
Okay, thank you. Disclosure of members' interests. Councillor Sesford.
Yes, Chair, I'd like to declare an interest in agenda item number 6. As an ex-fireman whose pension is paid administered by WIPF, and when I brought this up last year, I was advised to withdraw from the room. So by the then monitoring officer, so I shall do the same this year as well.
Okay. Yeah, and I'll obviously declare an interest in case it comes up that I am chair of Advanced Northumberland. I don't think there's anything specific in the agenda about it, and I've been advised that if there is, so long as I don't spend any time talking about it, it'll be fine. Okay, so we're now at item 4, which is a monitoring report and action log, and I think Mr. Gerard wants to say something. Oh, well, apparently I've got somebody keeping me right here. I've done the disclosure of member interest, but I missed out minutes. So I'm not sure how this works, because can I sign them? Because I wasn't here for the whole of the previous last meeting.
If the meeting agreed that they're correct, then yes, you may, sir. Okay,
so are we agreed that it's their true and correct record? Agreed. Excellent, thank you. So thanks for keeping me right. The next is, as I say, the monitoring report action log. And you have something to say.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to thank the Chair for the opportunity to address the committee this morning. This is a prepared statement I'm presenting in my capacity as the Director of Law and Governance, and I will ask for this statement to be read into the minutes for clarity. Following the report to the committee on the 26th of July of this year on the review of exit payments by the Executive Director of Transformation and Resources and Section 151 Officer, further inquiries have been undertaken and further advice has been sought on the matters identified. Having consulted widely, including with the leader and with other statutory officers, I have decided to refer the matter to the Northumbria Police for further consideration. I have advised them that I will be taking this action and am currently assembling the detailed relevant material to refer to them. These matters inevitably take a considerable time to conclude, and while the matter is under consideration, I will not be making further comment, and I would urge a similar course of conduct upon members. I would also like to take this occasion to advise members of recent communication from the Northumbria Police in relation to matters concerning Arch North East. This was a matter raised by Northumberland County Council in 2017. The police advised that since the referral in 2017, they have undertaken 3 separate investigations led by trained and accredited senior investigating officers. Following the conclusion of all investigations, they are satisfied that the threshold of criminality has not been met and the evidence does not support any further police action. In the circumstances, I don't propose taking questions.
Okay, so that's just for your information, really. So the next item on the agenda is still the monitoring report and the action log. And who's, are you doing this, Mr. Gerard, or is Kevin? Or are you, Jan?
I'm happy to
Right, go on then.
take this.
Yeah, this is pages 11 to 16.
Yes, so the update on progress with power review and challenge board recommendations is on your agenda today. The best strategic business case, a report will be coming back to the committee in January, and that report will be focusing on the best value, how best is enabling the council to meet its best value duty, which was my understanding of the focus that the committee wanted to bring to that, rather than reviewing the strategic business case itself, which has already been through scrutiny and executive. So that will be coming back to you in January, as will the International Lessons Learned review. On item 4, Councillor Grimshaw, you've had that information now, so I think we can close that that item. And workforce issues, item number 7, that's January, and I think that just leaves items 5 and 6, which are outstanding, which are yours, Kevin.
Thank you, Jan. Thank you, Chair. Yes, in respect of item 5, that is further to the report which I have already brought to the committee relating to this matter. Once our further work is concluded, it would be envisaged that a further report would be brought to committee, and that is the case. So once that work is concluded, I will update committee as you would expect.
Councillor Dale?
Can I just ask, Jan, to the best report, I know it's gone to scrutiny, but we've never actually had any presentation on it. And I just wondered if it would be helpful. I know it's gone to scrutiny. I haven't seen it, though, but I thought it would be helpful for us to understand where you're going with the audit on the work.
Okay. Well, when I bring a report homing in on the best value duty, I'm happy to provide further context. The strategic business case is available on the council's website. It went to Cabinet in January. I'm happy to forward a copy of that to members of the committee if they'd like to have that to hand. And when I bring that further report in January, you know, I'm happy to put that in the context of the wider BEST programme. But best value is one of the key work strands within BEST. It's a much bigger programme, and to be perfectly honest, you know, you could sit here and spend 3 hours at every meeting, you know, discussing BEST. So to start with, I'm proposing to bring you a more focused report, but I will set it in the context of the wider programme. And just to say that there is a BEST update, which is going through Cabinet and scrutiny at the moment. So that's also publicly available. And I'm happy to share all of those documents with the committee as well, just to give you that wider context.
Okay, excellent, thank you. So we're now on to 5, report of the governance of law, report of the Director of Law and Governance, pages 17 to 24.
Thank you, Chair. This is part of the continuing work to move all of the CALA recommendations into business as usual, and in a sense to essentially bring them into the routine and day-to-day activities of the Council and on the journey to normality. I think I hope the report is fairly self-explanatory as to, in a sense, where the work has been assigned and the progress that's then been made in respect of those categories, but happy to take questions if there are any. So.
Questions, anyone? Councillor Dale?
Yes, can I just ask you on page 22, is the member development? The follow-up actions maintain focus on clearly articulated member development.
Sorry, what your question is, Councillor Dale?
It's just, I think we need to have a closer look at it, because I know, for instance, the programme I'm on isn't working. There's various things aren't working. People are not taking up the development training, etc. So I think we need to have some more work done on that to ensure that we have a proper audit base on actually ensuring that actually people are taking on board or taking part in the training, and also on the IT system that where I'm meant to be doing, and you know, putting in. I can't actually sign in for lots of things. The Chris Angus does know about it, but it needs to be looked at carefully.
Thank you for that feedback. I'll take that on board and perhaps have a conversation offline, if I may, Councillor Dale, if you're having particular problems.
I think everybody is. Thank
Oh,
you.
well, sorry, I didn't. Sorry, I didn't mean. If members are having problems, I'm happy to have conversations
Absolutely,
offline as to
thank
how we
you.
can improve the system.
Okay, anyone else? Yes, I'm sorry, my mind has gone completely blank. But
Sorry, I'm Peter Topping.
of course you are, Peter.
Member,
Sorry,
but
Peter, fire away.
I'm happy to wait for councillors to ask questions.
No, you're of equal
Thank you.
standing here.
Thank you. Well, just for information, I mean, my day job is to review government programmes. So, looking at the progress report here, which is very detailed, and that's fine, but I've got 3 queries, one of which is I think it would be helpful, particularly picking up on what Councillor Dale was just saying, if there was some sort of RAG status, red, amber, green status, so that people could quickly see where the progress was being made, and obviously when actions are complete, then they can be turned to blue. I mean, I'm not trying to make work, but I think it would just make it simpler. And then I had 2 specific ones, if I may, one of which is where it says establish a scheme of performance appraisal. I think it would be helpful if further future reports and updates demonstrated the percentage of people who were in a performance appraisal scheme, rather than, you know, just whereas we're working on it, to give a measure of progress. And over the page, on page 23 at 10.2.4, where it says review and redraft the Constitution, and the comment is this action is complete, what I would be looking for there is the evidence that it was complete, and if that was it was adopted by a working group and ratified by council, that whatever, that would be the evidence that action was complete. But I think it would be helpful to have a bit of detail.
Thank you, sir. I mean, in respect to the first 2, I'll take those points on board. In relation to the Constitution, it was adopted at the annual general meeting of the council this year, and it was before my incarnation at the council, but it was redrafted, rewritten, and I think we're now bedding it in, and the issue now is making sure that it works and it does what it was intended to do. Touch wood, it seems to be working very much as anticipated. Yeah. But of course, the Constitution is something you keep under review all the time. But it was indeed adopted at the annual general meeting this year.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely fine. I think it just would be helpful to.
We will recall
say
that.
Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Excellent, thanks, Peter. Councillor Dale?
Yes, I was just going to ask about the 10.2.6, and it was just for a timeline, please. I think it's probably a good idea to know when actually that work is going to take place, and where you will have a shareholder committee working with local partners. So we do have a deadline. It's not just one day, you know, it's got to be a proper deadline, please, because that would help us actually monitor the work.
Jan?
Okay, so the framework for establishing the rationale for the establishment or continuation of any company, that was completed last year. I think it was around this time last year, October or November of last year, there was a report to Cabinet, and that framework was agreed. the point about the shareholder committee, there have been 2 meetings of the shareholder committee. So what we have said is that we will allow those arrangements to run for a year, and we will then invite local partnerships to come in and or somebody suitably qualified to come in and review how well those arrangements are working, and that would be reported back to this committee as part of your assurance framework. So that is what we are proposing to do. So you can expect a report. The first meeting was in July of this year, so 12 months would be July of next year, and then we will need to allow time for the review. So it will be the autumn of 2024 when that will come back to this committee. So if you want us to put that on the work programme, very happy to do that, yes.
Okay, is everyone else happy? Excellent, that's what we like to see. Now we'll get on to some of the real juicy bits of this. This is a report of the Executive Director of Transformation and Resources, and it's the Fire and Rescue Local Pension Board Annual Report, pages 25 to 54. Jan, are you kicking off?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to say something very briefly, and then I'm going to hand over to Lewis, who is with us. Lewis, for the first time, has been involved in pulling together the annual report. You recall that previously Claire Gorman came to the committee to present this report, but Lewis has now taken on that role. So all I am going to say is that this is the annual report of the Fire Pension Scheme Local Pension Board. We bring this to you every year. It's not an item for decision, it's just for you to receive and to provide any comments if there's anything that you wish to comment on. So that's all I'm going to say, and I will hand over to Lewis if that's
Questions,
okay.
anybody? Councillor Dale?
Can I just mention the one about the governance? For quorum, at least one member representative, at least one employee representative must be present. And on one occasion, neither of the county councillors were present. And it's something that if people can't represent the county council, then they should actually find somebody who can, because obviously there's only one person who's been actually attending the meetings. So we need to have a look at that.
Fair point. Anyone else? I think we were all stunned by the complexity of the report, but to me it seemed as though things were on the right track and everybody's being paid and the funds are secure. So well done, I would say. Let's hope we have the same result next year. So shall we just move on? It looks as though we're going to. Does someone want to tell Trevor? Then we shall move on to the strategic audit plan, pages 55 to 72. Is this you, Kevin?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll just wait for... Yes, thank you, Chair. This is a report which I usually bring to Audit Committee each November, just with an interim mid-year position statement on the audit plan. Committee will remember that we brought the audit plan in March of this year, setting out the work that we would undertake during 23-24. And this just provides the committee with a mid-year position statement on progress against that plan. At paragraph 4.2 in the report there, we just sort of detail of the 49 assignments programmed. At the mid-year point, we have 24 of those either in progress or completed, so about on target for completion during the year, and obviously reflects that we've also finalised work from the previous year, in addition to undertaking additional work that wasn't included in the plan. A plan is a plan at a point in time, and obviously that bends and fluctuates during the year with emerging risk issues and so on. But then further down at paragraph 4.4, we just sort of break down those 49 assignments, so it's kind of clear the position of all of those. And then at appendix 1 on page 61, there is just a copy of the plan as agreed in March, with an added column on the end of it of a current status update for each item on the plan. In addition, Chair, committee will recall that June 22-23, we agreed some key performance indicators that we would measure and report to committee, and those are summarised at paragraph 4.7 of the report at the mid-year point. So again, all 4 of those are about on target for satisfactory completion during the year in accordance with the target set. And I know committee will remember we had some actions identified from our self-assessment against the public sector internal audit standards. And it's just I agreed at that point to bring periodic updates back to you as a committee so you can see that we are taking the required action. So an update is attached as Appendix 2 to the report, and that starts on page 69. Chair, I will stop there, but I'm more than happy to take any questions.
Excellent. Questions for Mr MacDonald? No? Peter, was that you? Fire away.
Yep, okay, thank you, Chair. Kevin, just looking at the audits that have been reprogrammed to next year, and you've got 20% of them. I'm particularly seeking reassurance on the reprogramming of the IT ones, that we're not just moving the can down the road. And things like, because things like incident management and security access issues, where I think that one's a limited assurance one. We need to be very conscious that those are the things that can trigger an IT breach very, very quickly. So I'd be concerned if we were continuing to reprogram those further into the future. Kevin. Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes. Yes, thank you, Peter. A good question, and I can give the committee assurance that that's not the case. So we had some of our IS audits where we identified issues in limited assurance reports. We actually have a very good working relationship with IS colleagues in terms of monitoring the implementation of the recommendations. And I think sometimes some of the recommendations that we make in the IS world sometimes aren't a quick fix. So if it's about needing some new software, some new hardware, that can obviously take some time to implement the recommendation in full. What we'd be looking at, and what we do look at as part of the following up of our recommendations, which we do periodically, is to make sure that progress is being made to mitigate the risks in place and that they're not just being ignored and they can't kick down the road as you sort of suggest. And that's definitely not the case. What I then have to think about in terms of the resource I've got and weighing up that risk is about then the value that I will add back to the organisation if I do the audit again when I know some of the recommendations are in the process of being implemented. So I can give the committee the assurance that it's not that we're just ignoring it, it's constantly in hand. We're constantly working with IS colleagues for the implementation of those recommendations, and where recommendations haven't been implemented yet, that there are mitigating controls in place in the meanwhile. But it's about providing the best and optimum value back to the organisation when I'm looking at how I sort of undertake that assessment of risk. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, Peter, yeah?
Yep.
Councillor Oliver, then Councillor Grimshaw.
Thank you. On a very similar sort of question about timescales, the 2 reviews of a few reviews have been pushed back into next year for understandable reasons. One of them is multiple large-scale capital schemes, and another is contract management arrangements. Obviously, together, those things will account for quite a large amount of council spend, and therefore, probably quite important reviews. They're being pushed back, that's fine, but are they being pushed back to the beginning of next year or later? Because it would be good to get them done as quickly as possible, I think.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you, Councillor Oliver. Again, I would probably give a very similar sort of answer in terms of the reasons for the reprogramming. And what we'll do is we'll discuss the profiling with the service area. So if it's something where we think, actually, yes, we can bring that to the beginning of the year, then that's something we can certainly build into the profiling of our planned work.
Okay. Councillor Grimshaw.
Thank you,
Then
Chair.
Councillor Dale.
Thank you, Chair. That's exactly what I was going to ask you. That's what I picked up as well. And also, there's been slippage and I just wondered if that's... I know it's factored in, etc., but, you know, looking at it, could we, like Nick's has rightly so said, could we be looking at the beginning of the year instead of, you know, further down the line, because it is very important to pick this up, because it's got a lot to do with the, you know, the state of the economy at this present moment in time. So appreciate it if we could bring it forward. Kevin, thank you very much.
Okay, Councillor Dale.
Thank you very much. That's a similar thing, actually, but I'll start with that one first. It was just with because there's so many large capital scale schemes, which everybody is mentioning. And I think what we need to ensure is that the proper assessments have taken place, which means the economic, social, equality, environment, all those aspects have been taken into account. And it's just not a one-off spend because of various things, but because there have been some big ones. And I mean, I can take the original County Hall proposal against the work that's being done here, and the impact assessment, which I think EY did for us, which came through audit. So there was a lot of work done on that, and that was actually gave us quite a lot of good background about actually what should happen and how assessments should take place. So if we could have that looked at, that would be great. But the other one is just about the borderlands. And that seems to be sort of sticking somewhere. I don't know why it's sticking, but I know, for instance, in Prado, which is part of the borderland area, includes one of my wards, but they haven't had meetings for well over a year plus. So I don't know actually what's happening with borderlands. So whether you could have a proper report on actually if anything is happening on, or have they all been delayed?
Gerald, certainly the first point is noted. Certainly when we come to undertake that work on the contract work, Councillor Dale, that your comments are noted. With regard to the borderlands, I can comment that we've now concluded our work in terms of the audit review, which is on page 64. It's stated on 64 regarding what's happening in terms of the delivery of the Borderlands project. That wouldn't be a question for me. That would be a question for the Borderlands team. So I think certainly take a request back to the Borderlands team to give an update on what work is happening within the programme. I'm happy to do that, Chair.
Yeah, excellent. Jan?
Yeah.
So the Borderlands programme is subject to an assurance framework which is agreed with the sponsoring department, so Department of Housing, Levelling Up and Communities in this instance. Those assurance arrangements and the assurance framework was agreed with DULAC at the outset. So they are what they are. But I'm very happy again if members would like to know more about the status of the delivery of the Borderlands programme. I'm very happy to circulate the most up-to-date information that's available, rather than bring a further report to this committee, Councillor Dale, if that's acceptable.
Yep.
Thank you. I think it's a frustration, actually.
Yeah.
Of actually what is going to be delivered and when, and how is it commencing, and I think that's where the frustration lies. I
understand. All I will say is that as I'm the Section 151 officer for the accountable body for Borderlands, I have been involved in discussions with DULAC officials about how escalating costs are going to be dealt with. And that is a significant challenge for the Borderlands programme, that some of the projects are looking increasingly unaffordable unless government are prepared to put more money into the pot. So some of the delay is due to those discussions taking place with government. But as I've said, I'm happy to circulate, the most up-to-date information about where we are in terms of project delivery.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we're going to get a note from Jan about what's going on at Borderlands. I take it we're all happy with that. Yeah, okay, thank you all very much. The next one is key outcomes from internal audit reports, pages 73 to 94. This will be Kevin, I take it?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Lovely.
And this is, I guess, the other half of the previous report. So this report, again, which we bring each November for Audit Committee, just to give a summary of the outcomes of all of the audit assignments from the plan that we've completed during the last 6-month period, so covering May to October 2023. And following the normal format, the table which starts on page 81 of the papers just takes each sort of assignment that we've finalised and gives a one-page summary of the objectives, the assurance opinion, the recommendations made, good practice identified, and then perhaps more importantly, the final column about what's happened since the work was finalised. So that where we have sort of management coming back saying that they've implemented the recommendations made, where we've undertaken evidence checking against those recommendations, that's detailed in the tables. And then at page 92 and 93, we just run through the evidence checking process, just so as a committee you are assured, going back to some of the comments I've made earlier, in terms of us just going back and making sure that agreed recommendations are implemented across the authority, and then just details of the work that we've undertaken, which wouldn't result in a formal audit report, which is just at section 6. Again, Chair, happy to take any questions.
Questions? No. Anne?
Now, I was just going to mention about the business continuity plan. It's so important because it is the emergency contact lists and things like that. And it's so important that that is looked at carefully and actually managed as a matter of urgency, actually, because, you know, we have another emergency tomorrow. It just won't be in place. So I think, you know, that could be something that should be actually pushed forward quite quickly.
Kevin?
I think, Chair, yes, thank you, Councillor Dale. And I think, if memory serves me correctly, it was a high priority recommendation, and I think that's something that the team acted on straight away, because you're right, it was something
Absolutely.
that was just...
It's not something to sit on.
Yes, exactly.
Excellent. Nothing else then? It's the corporate risk management update, pages 95 to 98.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I haven't heard from you for a while.
No.
Carry on.
Chair, this is just a very short information report. We'd usually bring a corporate risk management update to committee in November, and this is just to advise committee that the executive management team have undertaken a fundamental review of the corporate risk register over the summer, which is currently being finalised. It's scheduled to be presented to Cabinet on the 12th of December for agreement by Cabinet, and then at that point we would bring the resulting agreed risk register to Audit Committee, and your role is overseeing that process. So it's just the report basically just outlines that and says that it's then therefore proposed that you will receive that report in the January meeting rather than November. But
Excellent.
again,
Okay, I think that's really just a note then, isn't it?
It is.
Excellent, thank you very much. So we're not doing too badly. We're now at 8. Report of the Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Corporate Services, pages 99 to 114. And the first one is Treasury Management Mid-Year Report, 23 to 24. And this always stuns us all. So, is this you, Jan, is it?
Would you like me to give you a very comprehensive
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
overview?
Yeah, we've got about 3 or 4 minutes. So.
Okay. I'll give you the digested version then. So this is the mid-year report. All of the Treasury management activity has remained within the prudential boundaries that, and indicators that were agreed by the committee at the beginning of the year. We continue to operate in a high interest rate environment with inflation easing. The expectation, I think, had been that interest rates would start to come down in the second half of the year. That is not what we're seeing, and all of the noise from the Bank of England is about interest rates remaining high for at least another 12 months. So we are continuing our current strategy of under-borrowing and using our cash reserves rather than undertaking external borrowing where we're able to. The silver lining is that we are earning more on investment of our cash balances than we anticipated when we set the budget. And the only other thing to note, although it's not part of this report, but I'm sure members always ask about the LOBOs, and we are expecting the LOBO, the lender option, buyer option loans to be recalled in December. So we will be repaying those. And that will be part of the report for the second half of the year. But just to say that it's highly likely that that will happen because the interest rate that the lender would want to charge is significantly higher than we could borrow from the PWLB. So I think it's likely that we will replace the LOBOs with PWLB borrowing in the next few weeks. And Chair, that's all I wanted to say.
Excellent. Questions? Councillor Oliver?
Just on that point about replacing the LOBOs with PWLB, the weighted average on the LOBOs is 3.9%. What are you expecting the PWLB? What's the current? Yeah, I know it's in the report, but
It depends
it's
what period we borrow for. But it will certainly be higher than
Higher than
we're
3.9.
currently paying. It would be
Yeah.
6, 4.7 probably, something like that.
Yeah.
So our weighted average cost of capital will go up when
Yeah.
we refinance.
but it's
But it
actually
will still
fallen
be
in the last 6
cheaper.
months. So
It will still
it's-
be cheaper than refinancing the LOBOs.
Okay, Councillor Dale?
No, thank you very much. I was going to add the same question as Nick, but also the issue about the rate of interest, the interest rate staying as it is, but also and I do note about the forecast reduction in the borrowing requirement and the use of reserves and how difficult it's going to be and how important that we look at this and keep an eye on the Treasury management, because actually that's the baseline about how you manage or you are managing the finances of the council.
Yeah, when we talk about, we're not actually drawing down from reserves.
No.
So this is about the cash, because the reserves for the most part are cash backed.
Yeah,
So yes, it's about using that cash in lieu of external borrowing. But you're quite right. Our ability to continue to internally borrow is going to come to an end at some point. In the next 12 months probably, so it is about managing the impact of that and minimising additional external borrowing until such time as interest rates do start to come down, because once we lock in to those long-term interest rates, it's very difficult to unwind that. So we're going to continue to put that off as long as we can.
And also it's important because it will, if we are going to go forward with a medium-term financial plan, that is going to be this is very much part of that consideration.
Absolutely, and that is a major piece of work which is ongoing at the moment, and we will be reporting back on the capital programme and the capital financing implications in January, ahead of budget setting in February. But that is a very big and complicated piece of work which the team are currently undertaking.
But can I just say, for instance, if the government is not going to give us our funding for, say, next 2 or 3 years, I mean, this year they only gave it for 1 year, so it's difficult for you to manage as well, accordingly, with with Treasury management. But if you're going to get it for 3 years, I don't know whether you will, that might give you some leeway about where you're going.
Well, the current comprehensive spending review period runs to the end of 25-26. So we have got some visibility about our funding position for next year and the following year.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why we're doing effectively a two-year budget.
Right.
After that, we have no visibility whatsoever about what our funding position is likely to be, other than, reading the runes following the Chancellor's autumn statement. It looks as though we're heading for another period of austerity. So, but it's very, very difficult to plan beyond that 2-year sort of horizon. And clearly there will be a general election before there's another comprehensive spending review. So yes, it is very difficult, Councillor Dale, but we'll do our best.
And I think that's why probably I'm more interested in seeing the best, because that's basically where you're actually trying to find your savings and provide better services to.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's where we have a degree of control. You know, we can't control the funding side of the equation, but we can control the spending side of the equation, and that's where those efficiencies come in. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for that. This is always a complicated report and you always make sense of it. And I'm really pleased we've got a fantastic team who well, it's the engine room of the council really, isn't it? And they've always managed to deliver. So I'm sure I've got supreme confidence that will continue to do so. So we're now on to 9, which is audit completion report year ending the 21st of March, the 31st of March 2022, pages 115 to 164.
Just for a second there, Chair, I thought I was going to have to revisit all the cut-off testing we've done on income and expenditure at the year end.
No, I wouldn't do that to you.
So in terms of I'm going to cover the audit of the accounts first, because that's the key thing we're trying to report on today, Chair. So we've made good progress on this, which has allowed us to issue the audit completion report. We still have work to do, completing a few areas, the quite key areas, and I'll go through those in a little bit of detail, Chair, if that's okay.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because those are likely the areas the members of the committee might have questions. But in terms of the overall feel from the audit, from discussions with Jan and her team, from the work that's been undertaken to date, from my review of the work that's been undertaken to date, and also the engagement quality control review of that work, we think, subject to completing that work and any further amendments that need to be made, that we'll be issuing an unqualified opinion on the accounts. Unqualified being good, remember.
Yeah. I was going to say, do emphasise that.
Yeah.
Unqualified in this case means good.
Yeah. Now, that's a nice segue, because you used the word emphasise. So you might recall the Jan issued Section 114 notices last June. I think it was June, or was it earlier than June? But it came to Council in June, in relation to the international business. You'll also recall, Chair, that there is a disclosure note in the accounts that references the payment of the international allowance to the former Chief Executive. Yeah, and that was one of the areas where Jan had made a decision in that Section 114 notice that was contrary to law. Yeah. So we've looked at that in the context of what's in your accounts, because clearly if there's an unlawful item of account, then that's something the audit has to reflect on in terms of the content of the audit report. Yeah. So we've looked at that. Now that note is a bit of an interesting one, because while there's a code that tells you what you've got to put in your accounts, there's also something called the account and audit regulations, which are statutory guidance you've got to follow. And in there, it sets out in a little bit of detail of what's got to go in that note. And crucially, that says the amount payable or paid to senior officers. Now, that maybe sounds like semantics, but it's quite important semantics. The council paid that amount, therefore that's in the accounts. We've asked Jan, and she has done so. She's amended the disclosure note to make it clear that's the situation. So we think we do not need to modify the audit report in relation to that, but we may and are reflecting on whether we should have what's called an emphasis matter or an other matter paragraph in the audit report, which isn't a qualification, which would basically refer a reader. So if they looked at our audit report, they'd see that and it'd say, we draw your attention to note whatever it is in the accounts, which states the following. Yeah, so we wouldn't be saying anything about it beyond, you need to read this. Yeah. Now, part of the reason for doing that is, you won't be surprised to hear, is that there are certain areas within the accounts that are immaterial, if you look at the big numbers we tend to use to test, but because there's a public interest in those areas, and surprisingly enough, what officers are paid and what members claiming allowances tend to be areas of interest, then we test those at a lower level, they become material, and therefore that's why it's important. So that's one of the things that's taken a bit of time, just working through that process. But we've got through that now. We followed the internal process in that. We just need to make a decision one way or another whether we need one of those paragraphs or whether we don't.
And who will make that decision? Will it be you? Or?
It'll be me, but I can't do it in isolation, if that makes sense.
Fine,
so in the end, the judgment is mine because it's my audit report, but clearly as an engagement quality control reviewer, because you're a big council, you spend a lot of public money, and there's an internal process that we need to go through where there's a potential risk of qualification, and even if there isn't, if we're going to amend the audit report in any way at all. So
Okay.
we've already done that. We've already gone through the process of, is it a qualification issue? And it isn't. The process that's remaining is just whether we include a paragraph in the report. Yeah.
So are we all clear on that? We understand?
It's
this?
quite an important point,
Yeah,
that I
good.
think.
So
We're going to come back to it on another point
we
later
have
on. in the report.
acknowledgement that people understand, so
Yeah.
that's good.
So that will appear in the 2021 audit report, to be clear,
Yeah,
and 21-22. And I can't remember if it was still getting paid in 22-23 at all or not, but we can revisit that when we need to. It might have been for
Yes,
a couple of months.
there was a small overlap.
Yeah. That might take it below materiality at that point, though. Yeah. No, yeah, it will. Yeah, it will. Value for money. We're working through the reporting on that still. We sort of need the decision making around about the exit packages to be finalised to allow us to completely conclude. So I think we've got what we need in terms of international. We've got what we need from the CALA report and some of the follow-up work that's been done and reported through the committee over the last 12 months. Probably is about 12 months now, isn't it, in practical terms. We're satisfied that some of the other arrangements that I think were originally reported by your predecessor auditor in 1920 had been resolved, or they were just complete one-offs. Yeah. So broadly, we've got, I think, a lot of the evidence. We're just waiting on that final point, I think. Whole of government accounts is frustrating. So whole of government accounts, everybody knows what that is, I assume, but if you don't, just to be quick, you produce accounts, there's a lot of forms you've got to fill in as well. The forms should agree to the accounts. The National Audit Office didn't issue the group instructions that they sent to auditors until quite late for 21-22. They have been issued now, but what they haven't done yet is notified audit firms, not just us, who the sample components are. So you might be a sample component, you might not. And until we know if you are or not, we can't issue a certificate, which we couldn't anyway because we've still got the audit to finish. But we're waiting on them telling us who. So you could be picked because you're quite big, but we don't know that yet. Wider powers, clearly working through that in terms of the issues that the council's faced over the last 12 months. But we've not had any formal questions from members of the public, or we've not had any formal objections. We've had clearly some correspondence from members of the public around about the CALA report, etc. But given the council commissioned the CALA report, it all went through full council in June. There's been a clear plan of action to address all of those issues. Bluntly, we've generally gone back to those individuals and said, have a look in the council website.
right.
Yeah.
Good.
So in terms of status of the audit, I'm just going to canter through these. The intention is to get a lot of this work done over the next month or so towards Christmas. That's the plan. Might be early into the new year for some of the issues. It just depends what comes up. So infrastructure, this is an issue we've spoken to about a few different times. Central government, because they have a sense of humour, issued the statutory guidance on this on Christmas Day last year, which is a nice present for us all. The council had to work through that post-Christmas once it was clear what you had to do. We started to look at that. We still got a couple of queries outstanding on that. Bluntly, we stopped the audit at a certain point in time because we had to move on to other things. We've come back to the audit now. We need to clear those issues up, but we don't anticipate there's going to be a big issue in there. You'll see it later in the report, and one of you will pick it up, I'm sure. When you get into the risk section, one of the headings is wrong, which the manager managed to miss, I managed to miss, and the engagement quality control review managed to miss. It's got PFI in twice. It should say, the second one should say accounting for infrastructure assets. Apologies. It doesn't change what's in the table, it's just the heading at the top of the page. Pensions has been an interesting issue for you and for most of the councils that hadn't been signed off by March 23 for 21-22. So we've discussed this previously, but just very quickly. You got a new rates and adjustment certificate 31st of March, Jan? Yep. The new rates and adjustment certificate is based on data at 31st March 22. That means that essentially there was evidence of an adjusting post-balance sheet event. Because the audit hadn't been signed off in most places at that point in time because of infrastructure, it meant that we had to, Jan and ourselves had to take that into account in terms of impact that could have on the 21-22 accounts. What essentially that meant was we had to ask the auditor of Tyneware Pension Fund to do some additional testing for us. We got that testing, the result of that testing back in August this year. And we had some queries on that testing, which we've now got satisfactory answers to. We just need to finish documenting that work on the file, but we're not anticipating any further amendments to the accounts in relation to that area. So that's just us finishing work off. And what we'll do on that is when we've absolutely finished the work, we'll report the findings from that in a follow-up letter to this report. We're not going to reproduce the report because you'll all be trying to work out which bits changed, I think, from this one to the next. So we think it might be easier if we just do a letter with these headings in and say, this is the current the position at the end of the audit. Property, plant and equipment, we've still got responses to a small number of queries. We've still got a little bit of top-up testing to do in relation to investment property held by Advanced Northumberland. We're working with Robson Laidler just now in the 22-23 audit, where we've issued group instructions to them, which set out what we expect them to do that we can rely on. Part of that work will almost certainly involve us sort of working backwards in terms of some of that 22-23 work, if that makes sense, to get the assurance we need for the previous years, because we think that's the best way to do it. So we've instructed our evaluations team to have a look at what Robson Laidler are doing or have already done, and then topping up that testing for us. But we're going to do 3 years at once, so we don't have to do it 3 different times. That make sense? Yeah. Beyond that, there's just the normal things. Property, plant and equipment's been an area that we struggled with a lot of different places over the last few years. Our regulator has increased expectations and auditors around about what's a complex area. Clearly, it's an area of risk because there's this estimation uncertainty in terms of valuation judgments. And it's something that Jan and I have talked about a few times around about what the council can do going forward to make sure we don't continue to have these issues when we come to do that testing. It's probably been one of the areas that's held up the audit the most, actually, PPE. I shouldn't call it PPE anymore because we don't start talking about pandemic. VFM, as discussed. Group accounts, we've not fully completed the work that we do on the group. Clearly, the audit of Advanced Northumberland's finished. But having reviewed the file, we think there's still some top-up we need to do for the county council to get assurance at group level. Mainly to do with investment property, bluntly. The rest of it looks okay. We've got a few other issues around about just to resolve in terms of some areas of the accounts. They're not a lot of huge ones. One of them relates to the annual governance statement in relation to the exit packages issue, and one of them relates to considering the impact the exit packages issue may or may not have on the audit report. I'll come back to that when I get a bit further on the report, if that's okay, though, Chair. Yeah. Our review obviously has to be finished. We've had to, for internal reasons, we've had to change the engagement quality control reviewer during the audit because of an issue that's arisen. Not an independence issue in relation to the council, just an internal issue. And he's now up to speed in reviewing files as we go. So we're back on track on that front. And clearly we don't do anything in post-balance sheet events until we're just about to sign the audit off, and we'll be issuing you the letter of representation to sign. So in terms of the fundamental approach hasn't changed, particularly from the start of the audit to the end. Materiality changes based on what ends up in the accounts in terms of what you spend. The way we set it hasn't changed. It's still the same percentage. It's still based on what you spend. Nothing changed. And as far as we're aware, there are no changes to the experts that you've used during the audit either. And nor are there any changes to the experts that we've used. Page down, suddenly decided to start working. There we go. Nothing much has changed in terms of the group audit approach. You'll see that we're proposing to rely on the work that the completely independent audit team does on Advance, but having reviewed the file, as I mentioned, we've got some top-up to do. It's to do with the valuation of investment property, just to make sure we've got enough assurance at group level. In terms of significant findings, management override control is an important one. Members will probably recall that the reason this is quite important is it's a fundamental risk that all auditors must recognise in relation to all audits everywhere, no matter size, if there's an audit required. Can't rebut it. It's quite key because it's to do with the potential risk of fraudulent manipulation of the accounts. And you'll see that we've actually finished the work in this area. Got a little tiny bit of topping and tailing probably to do with any final journals that have to be put through if we find any more errors that need to be adjusted. But beyond that, we've got the assurance that we need, and we've not identified any issues we need to need to report to the council. So in other words, we found no evidence of material fraud in relation to the financial statements. I think an important point. Pensions I've already really covered. We're just top and tailing that work. We're not anticipating there'll be any further changes to the accounts. The council did get an updated report from the actuary, did amend the accounts for that. We've done the work in relation to that. We've done the work in relation to the membership data update. We just need to get it all finalised and put on the file and conclude. But the conclusion will be no further amendments. We just need to report in a bit more detail back to you in terms of what we've done. I'm not sure where you're going to be sitting in 23-24, John, in terms of whether you're going to have a pensions asset or not. But the way things are going, I've got one client who went from a liability last year to a £260 million asset at the 31st March 2023, mainly due to the impact interest rates had on some returns. If you get into that position, that one of the discussions we'll be having with Jan and her team will be around about the asset ceiling. Because where you're in that position, you've got to get a separate calculation done by the actuary to say, actually, the maximum asset you can recognise in the accounts is this much, which may be less than what the actuary tells you the asset for the council is. An issue for a future year, because it's not an issue at the moment as things stand, but just highlighting that next year, if that happens, we'll be having some interesting discussions trying to explain to you how that works.
A nice problem to have, though.
It is a nice problem to have, although you can't get the money out of it, which is a bit of a problem. PP I've already mentioned, really, nothing much to say on that. A lot of the work's already done. We've just got a little bit extra just to finish off. We've got a few outstanding queries. It is definitely an area for the council to improve the processes he's got in place, particularly around about the information the valuer uses to carry out the valuations and making sure that's all done in accordance with RIC's requirements and consistently. Like I say, not an uncommon issue across the public sector, not just councils. PFI, nothing to report. So the work on PFI is completely finished, reviewed. No issues identified that we need to bring to your attention. And then we get on to page 16 of our report, where it says enhanced risk accounting for PFI arrangements. It should say enhanced risk accounting for infrastructure assets. Andrea, it's just that. I should read it better. My own report. You'll see that we anticipate concluding that what the council's done in response to the override that was put in place at Christmas is sufficient, but we've not quite topped and tailed that yet. We've still got a couple of queries just to get sorted out, which are in hand. In terms of the quality of the council's accounts, accounting policies are in line with what we'd expect for a local authority of this size, with the assets, liabilities, income and expenditure you've got, and complexity. Generally speaking, I think the accounts are good quality. I think they've improved since we became the council's auditors. Key area probably for a little bit more improvement is around about the property, plant and equipment valuation stuff. But that's really the key thing. I think a lot of it is pretty good, generally speaking. And I don't say that lightly. And then we talk about some of the things that we discussed with management. So clearly the things we've talked about are the things that have taken the most time in the audit, the more complex ones. So we reflect on there a little bit around about the work on infrastructure, a bit more around about the myriad issues we've had in pensions. And we also talk about some of the things that have held the audit up, including two of them national issues that there's not really much you could have done about. You had to wait till the government sorted out the infrastructure issue in terms of what you had to do. That had a knock-on impact on things getting done. Then the pensions issue came up, and that's applied to a lot of places as well. And I think you'll probably be aware that only 1% of local government 22-23 audits were done by the deadline this year. I suspect the percentage probably won't have changed a huge amount by the end of this month. And then there's a few areas there that are more council specific in terms of us finishing the work. One of the issues that's caused is we get to a certain point where we have to stop because we have to go on to other audits and get those done and then come back again. So that's had an impact in terms of timeline. There's not really much Jan and the team could do about that because clearly we can't have other audits disadvantaged just because we've still got a group of other audits that are delayed for other reasons, other national issues or local ones. I've already touched on nothing in terms of questions or objections from members of the public. Section 5's got a few internal control recommendations, Chair. I wasn't planning on going through those. I'm hoping they're sort of self-explanatory. If members have got any questions on those, I'm happy to answer them. Some of the questions might, of course, be directed at Jan. Between the two of us, I'm sure we can cover them off. And then beyond that, Chair, we're into VFM. I think I've probably covered that already. There's a set of misstatements that have either been unadjusted or they've been adjusted. If they're unadjusted, that means that Jan and I are comfortable with the fact that that couldn't have a material impact on the opinion. Because if it was going to have a material impact on the opinion, Jan and I would probably have agreed that Jan was going to amend the accounts. What that means in practical terms is the letter of representation, when we eventually issue the final version we want back, that will include those in it. Because essentially the Audit Committee and Jan have to be comfortable that that couldn't result in material misstatement, and then we do too. Audit report's not in there yet for the reasons already outlined in terms of the need to consider it. Quickly on exit packages, issue is similar to the one on the international allowance in terms of lawfulness. If lawfulness is the decision that the statutory officers make, clearly we need to consider that in the context of the accounts, because there's also a note in your accounts around about exit packages. So we will consult, at that point we'll consult internally about whether or not that results in a modification to the audit report or not, or whether we're back into that consideration of the need for an emphasis matter paragraph or other matter paragraph that draws attention to the note. So that's something we're going to discuss with, I think it'll be Steve and Jan at a point in time when they've made those, we've finished those deliberations, I think is probably the way to put it. VFM wasn't going to say much more about. I've said already that there's a slight error on the VFM page on page 39 where it says we anticipate issuing a qualified opinion. That's sort of old speak. What we mean is we anticipate issuing recommendations in relation to VFM because of weaknesses. Yeah. It's slightly different. 1920s of VFM. You'd not be surprised to hear that the fundamental things that are going to appear in there are some of the issues that are in the Cala report and some of the issues that have appeared in various reports that have come through either full council cabinet or the audit committee over the last 12 months in the areas we've discussed at length in previous meetings and earlier, I think. So beyond that, Chair, I'm happy to take any questions.
Excellent, thanks for that full summary of the report. Appreciate
Well, it's important probably to give you a bit more than we normally would, just because it's
that's
not quite
absolutely
complete.
fine. Dare I just ask Councillor Dale to kick us off?
Thank you. I just was going to ask about some of the statements. I'm not going to go into all the issues which you've obviously which are going to be qualifying. Just on page 6.
Page 6.
And it is just a disclosure.
Do you mean page 6, Councillor Dale? Do you mean?
The council received, the draft accounts identified that in 2021 the council received £7.31 million in relation to contain outbreak management fund, which obviously was a special grant, I presume, for COVID, and the correct figure was 2.20 million. So there's quite a big, you talk about £5+ million there. Is that just what I was trying to find out was, I presume, hopefully it was misspent, and that 7.3 million wasn't spent by the council.
It wasn't in the accounts, Councillor Dale. This is an error that was in the bit that goes in front of the accounts, the narrative report. So if you look at I think you've got a set of the accounts.
I think
you saw a set there.
I didn't go looking for that, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. So the front end of the accounts is called the narrative report. So that's where Jan basically sets out a narrative about how things have gone, what the statements are for, outturn position and various other points. And then after that, you've got the annual governance statement, then the accounts themselves. So this was an error in the narrative report, as I understand it, where I think just the wrong number has been put in, Jan, isn't it?
Yeah. So, I mean, I can
Doesn't have an impact on the accounts, basically, is what I'm saying.
I just don't want I just hope we didn't get out spending all the money. That was all the thing. But I'm sure other people have got some other questions to ask, and I'll come back afterwards.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else? No. Peter?
Sorry, yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of queries, Cameron. Regarding the pensions, the commentary, this isn't to do with the delays on the McLeod remedy.
No, nothing to do with that at all.
Right, so it's nothing. Okay.
It's just because of timing.
Right.
So, where something happens and an audit's open, yeah, even after the year ends, that has an impact on something in the accounts from the previous year, we need to have a look at that in terms of whether it's an adjusting or a non-adjusting post-balance sheet event. So because Jan got an updated rates and adjustment certificate, a rates and adjustment certificate sets out what you've got to pay basically, isn't it, for the next 3 years. And what that actually does there is that the pension fund gives the actuary a load of information about the pension fund and about the individual bodies within the pension fund. And they go away and do a valuation of the pension fund, and that then determines how much you're going to pay. That is separate to how you account for it. It's a different valuation. But one of the things that actuary does at that point in time is they update the numbers based on the membership data at the 31st March 22. Yeah. So because they did that, that meant that could have an impact on the other valuation that gets done that the council then has to include in its accounts. So therefore, we seek assurance around about the sort of differences between what they'd used with those more up-to-date figures, and therefore the impact that has on the council's accounts. So not just for Northumberland, any other audit hadn't been signed off for 21-22, which I think was every single audit in Town of Wear and Northumberland and Teesside.
I have one more, if that's, yeah. So someone will make sure that this isn't straying into past history, but if I look at the 2021 report, right at the beginning it says 5 out of the 6 people in the senior management structure were interims. And I just wonder whether in your sort of management control element of your report, whether that level of interim senior management is a red flag that it would be appropriate to comment on or not.
I think this is a debate that Jan and I have had actually, but in practical terms, I'm going to try and put this, how can I put this? There's interims and there's interims. So
yes.
Yeah, so in the context of the council's position for 21-22, as far as I'm concerned, and given the engagement we've had with statutory officers during that process, you've had some very, I'm not going to sort of shine Jan here, but you've had some very experienced people in those statutory officer roles. So I know you've had quite a lot of turnover at certain points. I think 2021 will be reflecting on that. 21-22, I think we're a bit more confident that while you've had interims, there are a lot more experienced interims, the same through into 22-23. So from our point of view, we wouldn't see that as I personally wouldn't see that as an internal control weakness. It's something we probably will reflect on when we come to draft the auditor's annual report, which is separate. It's not the signed audit report.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Good question. Nick?
Just a clarification on a term in the accounts. It's possibly one for Stephen or Jan, but what's a quantum merits payment? In the notes on to senior salaries on page 49 in note 1, there's a quantum merit. I've never heard of that term before.
In the accounts?
Yeah.
Page 49?
Yeah.
I wonder if that's been a spell check. I don't ever see that either. He's audited for that.
You might have to come back on that.
Yeah, well, you might have to get a written response. I thought it was a hotel chain, but what do I know?
It's right in that first paragraph, Jan.
Oh, the first note.
I think there's it looks Latin.
Oh, okay. So I think in that context, it means that she was paid for the work that she did, basically.
The term legally would imply that it was something which was not covered by the contract, but it was work which deserved remuneration. But I wasn't there at the time, so that's sort of law 101. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're not doing rabbit holes today.
Ask me about that.
Councillor Dale, did you want to come back?
Yeah, I was just looking for the right pages. On page 36, well, I think it's page 36, right. It's where you mentioned about the removal of brick bulk from the accounts. So I was just
36 of the accounts.
No, the report.
no, it's not. It's on the.
No,
Still on the audit report at the
No,
moment,
it's,
yeah.
it's Mazar's report.
Narrative report, second bullet towards the top of page 36.
What page is it?
Okay.
36 on our report. You had it open just, it's that
Yep.
previous page, Councillor Dale.
Yes, it is. It's got. I've got it here. It's just small writing. I've got to start beside it. That reference is actually in the statement of accounts, which basically says, sorry, Britvault has planned to work has started on site, etc. And then it's got Recharge Industries have acquired Britvault and are now in the process of securing the major development funding necessary to construct the gigafactory and acquire and store production equipment. And then it's got on to say, to successfully achieve this, Recharge Industries has requested the council issue a deed of variation on the call option, which forms part of the sale agreement for the land at Northumberland Energy Park.
I think the version we've got hasn't.
I'm just sorry, well,
I
this
wonder
is
if
the one
that's
we
the
were sent, because what I'm trying to say is that is in the one we were sent yesterday.
That wording, John.
You'll have all got it. Have you got it? It's page 21.
Oh, back to the accounts now, are we? Sorry.
Well, no, it's the statement of accounts. Right.
I'm
And
sure that's
the
been amended,
audit,
isn't it?
external auditor said it should be removed. However, what I was going to say, which I was going to bring up at the last meeting, was in the annual government statement for 22-23, the same paragraph or nearly the same paragraph appears. And I just think we need to have clarification if this is actually correct or not correct, because to me, with reading what's been going on, it's an anomaly and maybe it should be
I think
removed.
Jan needs to, are you able to comment on this?
I
or
am.
should we have
So the
Jan do
current
it?
position is that Recharge Industries have acquired a number of British Volt assets from the administrator of British Volt. I don't believe that that transaction has been completed yet, and there is a charge on the site. But the enabling works have commenced, so that is factually correct. Recharge Industries have acquired the assets of British Volt, and they are seeking to secure the funding. It is unclear.
I think we need some clarification.
It is unclear
around
what happens next, Councillor Dale.
that.
But I think this statement is broad, is pretty factual in terms of the current position. However, as you've raised the question, we'll have some further discussion with Cameron about whether the wording needs to be amended. But I don't think that there is anything at the present time that I would want to replace that wording with.
Yeah, I think the thing is that's that, and it's also obviously in the government statement for 2022, 23.
Indeed, so the two will have to be consistent.
Which we agreed as councillors on the members of the audit committee. So basically, I just feel because of the sensitivity of ongoing, which I don't want to know about, but assure that publicly that this is a public document, that actually that the public quite understand the position. So you might like to add on that little phrase you put in.
Indeed. So there is nothing in this statement which is not already in the public domain or which is factually inaccurate. Whether by the time we come to finalise the annual governance statement, and we know from what Cameron's just told us that there is a bit more work that needs to be done before we're ready to actually issue the audit completion certificate. We will revisit the wording. Okay, but at the present time, I haven't got anything to replace this with, so it will remain for the time being, and we will adjust it and make sure that it's consistent with the final version of the annual governance statement when we get to the point of issuing the audit completion certificate.
Yes, because I think my big thing is it's actually Advance who've had the input in more into the development of Britvault, but that's not for me to discuss at the present time.
And that's not material in the context of our accounts either.
No, I know, but it's just something that maybe needs to be looked at. But that's from
Your call, Councillor Dale. right at the very start, one of the things we
Right,
said, status of work in terms of work to complete, was work on the annual governance statement.
Right, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, for reassurance.
Okey doke. We're now at 9.2. We're talking about the accounts with a verbal update, or we've done that, or?
Well, just to note that you have the final set of accounts
We do?
in front of you for approval, which have incorporated all of those adjustments and further disclosures that Cameron referred to. It's final, but it's not final in the sense that, given that Cameron's still got some further work to complete, there may be some further adjustments. But we have taken this as far as we can for the time being.
Okey doke. Well, we'll have to see what Councillor Dale said. So, if we're able just to approve them for the moment, that would be really handy.
So,
I'm being whispered in my ear.
Chair, there are two recommendations. The first is that you approve this version, which incorporates all of the adjustments that have been identified and agreed with Cameron to date, and you then delegate authority to me to update the accounts for any further issues that come out of those discussions. And if I were obviously to exercise that delegated authority, I would then inform the committee, but I would not propose to bring a further iteration of the accounts back to the committee for approval. So that's what we're asking.
We're happy with that, are we? Everybody nods. So that's approved, unless you tell me it doesn't. Right, there we are. Is that all right, Stephen, or do you need a bit more?
No, that's fine, sir.
Excellent. So we're now at the report of we're at the statement of accounts, 10, 165 to 72. Is that it?
I think we've just done that one.
Excellent. Just Mr. Gerrard was supposed to kick me under the table when I've moved on. So we're now at urgent business. Haven't been told of any. We're now at the date of the next meeting, which is the 31st of January 2024. Can you believe that? 2024.
No, I can't. What gets me
At
closer to
10:15, bearing in mind that we should be back to the pre-meeting beforehand. And I've been told that the part 2 item is no longer required. Is that right? So I hereby close the meeting and thank you all for your forbearance. Then I've only taken an hour and 20 minutes, which I don't think is too bad. Enjoy the rest of your day. I look forward to seeing you on the 31st of January, if not before.